All right, so I guess I'll get started here. First of all, I do want to thank Thomas for inviting me here today and St. Hugh's for hosting me to give this talk on this very, very important topic. My name is Deborah Bricado. I was born and raised in Maryland, and so was my husband, and we've raised our 4 adult children here. I am a retired nurse. I also am a volunteer, or I've advocated for families and children for 30 years. I volunteered at a crisis pregnancy center for over 8 years. And I worked on the Campaign to Protect Women to the petition against the Abortion Care Access Act, which also took away some parental rights. And now I am the chair of Health Not Harm MD. This is a ballot issue committee registered with the state of Maryland. This is required if you are going to raise money to oppose or support a ballot issue, which is what this is. So let's get started here. Unfortunately, we don't have the screen, but I can go through, and if you take out the first one handout, I'm going to go through this handout. It looks like this, to show you what the law says, what our laws are now. So first of all, back in 1991, they passed the Maryland Freedom of Choice Act. And this is the law that made abortion legal in Maryland through all 9 months for any reason. And I'll read to you what it says. It says, the state may not interfere with the decision of a woman to terminate a pregnancy, 1, before the fetus is viable, or 2, at any time during the woman's pregnancy, if the termination procedure is necessary to protect the life or health of the woman, or the fetus is affected by genetic defect or serious deformity or abnormality. So this is when it was made legal. And that one phrase in there, the life or health of the woman, is why it's legal through all 9 months. Because that can be any reason. It can be depression, it can be anxiety over the pregnancy. So for all 9 months. And what you can notice about that law is it said woman in it. So it very specifically says woman. A woman is an adult female, and it says to terminate a pregnancy. So it's the language is very specific about what they wanted to do. And also I want to point out that in that law they required a physician to do the procedure, and they also said that parental notification back then was left up to the abortion provider. So the physician could determine whether or not the parents were notified if a minor girl was coming in for abortion. So that way back then, even then, they were looking at parents' rights. So the next law that came about, Mental Health Access Initiative of 2021. And what it says is, for the purpose of altering the minimum age at which a minor has the same capacity as an adult to consent to consultation, diagnosis, and certain treatment of a mental or emotional disorder by a healthcare provider or clinic, providing that a healthcare provider may decide to provide certain information to a certain parent, guardian, or custodian under certain provisions of law, unless the healthcare provider believes that the disclosure will lead to harm to the minor or deter the minor from seeking care. So that law, you can see, lowered the age for a child, a minor, to go and seek mental health care from age 16 to age 12. And they leave it entirely up to the person who's listening to the minor child about whether or not they should inform the parent. So that was in 2021. So next was the Abortion Care Access Act of 2022. And this is where they removed the physician requirement for abortion. So now women and girls going to seek abortion can't expect that level of safety of having a physician. They might think the person in the white coat is a doctor, but they are now called a qualified provider. And what the law said, it's provided by a qualified provider who is an individual licensed, certified, or otherwise authorized by law to practice in the state to do abortions. The law never really said what that training was or what the licensing would require or the certification. So that's still very foggy even now. Medicaid must pay for abortions. All health insurance providers must cover abortions without copays, deductibles, or cost sharing. So everyone in Maryland is paying for abortion through Medicaid or for their private health insurance. Parental notification for minor girls is determined by the qualified provider. So it's no longer even a doctor, it's just whoever that person is who's providing the abortion. And certainly they're trying to make money, so it would be in their best interest to not notify the parents. So again, parental rights are being removed. And then on top of that, this law passed, it said a special non-lapsing fund of $3.5 million in the annual budget was established. So this is something that's automatically in the budget every year. And actually, our governor just tripled that, tripled $3.5 million to about $11 million. So a lot of money going towards, instead of motherhood, going towards abortion. The next removal of parents' rights was the Trans Health Equity Act of 2023. And what this said is that non-discrimination to provide all drugs and surgeries for gender-affirming care, including puberty blockers. Adults do not need puberty blockers. So we know that this law was meant for minors because only minors need puberty blockers. And you go back to that Mental Health Access Act, and why would they lower it to age 12 to seek mental health care? Because that's about the age when puberty begins. So it's very deliberate, very intentional, but you don't always see it because there's a lot of pieces here. So minors are included because of the puberty blockers. Medicaid must pay for the drugs and surgeries. And when some legislators tried to change it so that they could exclude minors or require parental notification, that was voted down. So adults can already seek these procedures and these drugs, but minors, now it looks like because of this, they can at least get the puberty blockers. So it's just a chip away. So now we get to this amendment, and it's in the law that was passed. It's called the Declaration of Rights, Right to Reproductive Freedom. And here is what the amendment will say if it's passed. This is not going to change. This is the amendment that was passed. This will be put in our Maryland Constitution if the voters say they want it in the Maryland Constitution. It says, and I think it's on this paper under the red, that every person, as a central component of an individual's right to liberty and equality, has the fundamental right to reproductive freedom, including but not limited to the ability to make and effectuate decisions to prevent, continue, or end one's own pregnancy. The state may not directly or indirectly deny, burden, or abridge the right unless justified by a compelling state interest achieved by the least restrictive means. So if you compare that to the 1991 law, this is very broad and very vague, very deliberate, because it says that every person, and then it says an individual's right to liberty. Well, person and individuals can be adults or children, male or female. And then reproductive liberty is a vague term as well. And then it also says including but not limited to. The 1991 law was very specific about terminating a pregnancy. So if legislators want a law to be very narrow and specific, they can do it. But they chose not to in this amendment, so it's very misleading. Now the ballot question, here's where the deception comes in. The ballot question does not have to match the wording of the amendment. And the Secretary of State and the governor decide what that ballot question will say. Right now, we do not know exactly what it's going to say. In the law that was passed, they gave us an idea of what it might say. That's also on your handout. But they don't have to certify that until August 2nd. We don't know the question number it will be. They don't have to certify that till August 2nd. Now, what we do know is there is only one question on the ballot about a constitutional amendment. This is it. There will be other questions on the ballot, but they might be about local issues. So there's only one question on the ballot about a constitutional amendment. So we can say vote no to amending the Maryland Constitution. So what they say, it will be similar language to this. The proposed amendment confirms an individual's fundamental right to an individual's own reproductive liberty and provides the state may not directly or indirectly deny, burden, or abridge the right. That doesn't sound terrible, does it? If someone goes into the polling location and sees this on the ballot and doesn't really understand what it means, it sounds pretty reasonable, doesn't it? But it doesn't say what the amendment says. And they're not going to automatically think individual. That could mean anybody, not just adults. And most of them, the way you see the advertising going, they're trying to get people to think reproductive liberty, reproductive freedom, abortion, reproductive freedom, abortion, reproductive freedom. They're trying to get you to think it's just about abortion. It's not. So, as I pointed out, the words do matter. So there were legislators who did try and change the words person or individual to woman. It was voted down. They said no. They said, let's exclude minors from the amendment or at least put parental notification requirements. They said no. Let's replace reproductive freedom with abortion so we know it's just about abortion. They said no. Hey, let's match the ballot language to the amendment, because don't the voters have a right to know exactly what the amendment says? They said no. So again, the undefined terms, person, individual, those two things can be male or female, or adult or child. Reproductive freedom. So basically anything with the reproductive anatomy or the reproductive system. So that's a lot of things. It can include birth control, abortion, vasectomies, double mastectomies, lots of things, lots of reproductive freedom things. We'll find out once we pass it, right? You know, if you say yes to this amendment, I think we'll find out what it means. Reproductive liberty, reproductive autonomy, same thing. So, what we do know is this is a nationwide agenda. It's not just happening in Maryland. This has already been passed. Bills with, or laws with similar language or amendments have passed in California, Michigan, Ohio, and Vermont. They've already passed there, so we do see what's going on. On the ballot in November, in the general election, it will be on Maryland's ballot and New York, and I'm not sure which other states, but there are other states that are trying to get this on their ballots as well. So you can see it's not just limited to Maryland. This is happening throughout the nation. So the supporters are pushing to get this amendment passed in at least 10 other states this year. In Pennsylvania, they're trying to get it on the ballot, but it takes, in Pennsylvania, it takes a little longer to amend their constitution. They have to pass a bill through both houses of their legislature for 2 sessions in a row. But they have it in their legislature right now. They have one that they're trying to pass. So far, no movement on that. So what's the harm? We've kind of let you know that it's about parental rights. Clearly, an individual or a person can be a child. This is clearly about parental rights because adults already have the right to seek all these reproductive things. There's nothing stopping an adult from doing this. There's no law preventing an adult from getting gender transition. There's no law preventing women from getting abortions. It's legal in Maryland. It will stay that way. And there's no law preventing men from getting vasectomies. There's no law preventing women from getting tubal ligation. There's nothing happening. So this is about children. What this also will do, once you put this into our Constitution, it decreases the quality and safety for medical care. Because anytime you want to amend an amendment, you have to pass something through both houses down in the General Assembly and then put it on the ballot again and ask the voters if it's okay. Because anything that changes the amendment could be seen as a burden for that person exercising their right. So that's how it decreases the quality and safety. And we've already seen it with abortion, that the decreased quality and safety now that there's not a physician required for that. Crisis pregnancy centers. What we're seeing already in California is the Attorney General in California is suing some of the pregnancy centers for offering the abortion pill reversal, claiming medical malpractice. So it takes a lot of money for legal defense. And even if the lawsuit goes nowhere or fails or ends up being unconstitutional, it still takes money. And here in Maryland, they sued the pregnancy centers for not advertising for abortion a few years ago or referring for abortion. Now the pregnancy centers won that lawsuit, but they're going to come back again. And I've seen legislation down in Annapolis where they're talking about referrals and places that have to offer referrals for women with high-risk pregnancies. That's another side door of saying you're going to have to refer for an abortion facility because that's another resource. They're saying women need to know all the resources available. So for crisis pregnancy centers, this is a problem. If they're going to be sued, they're going to need money for legal defense. And instead of all the donations that generous people like you give them to try and provide help for the pregnant women in need, it could end up going for legal defense. And that's how they end up closing. Loss of conscious protection for healthcare professionals. We saw what happened during COVID. Doctors, nurses were losing their jobs if they didn't get vaccinated. Well, the same thing, if you're not going to participate in some of these procedures, you're going to be pressured to either participate or you might be pressured to quit your job. And I've seen legislation where pregnancy they're trying to get it to be considered an emergency condition, so that emergency rooms would have to provide the abortion procedure because, you know, pregnancy is an emergency condition. So you have to think about that and what it's going to mean for men and women who are in the healthcare profession. And then loss of free speech. If you're going to speak out against any of these procedures and then you end up getting sued, I think most of us don't have a legal defense fund set up for ourselves. So it's going to have a chilling effect. Even if the lawsuits are unfounded, unconstitutional, or they fail in the end, it still costs you money if you have to hire an attorney to defend yourself. All right, so how can you help? First of all, really bone up on this amendment and understand all the language in the amendment, and then you can spread the word to other people. And just print out the flyers and hand them out to people. I did want to point out one other thing, which is on this handout. In the marijuana amendment, when they put it on the ballot for us to vote and put it in our Maryland Constitution, they did define individuals as over 21 years of age. So this is something they can do. This is how you know it's deliberate. They asked us, do you believe that individuals over 21 years of age should be able to possess and use cannabis? So if they want to define these words, they can, and make it more specific, they can. The 1991 law was very specific. If they wanted to exclude very specifically minors, they could do that. So, and we already see in Montgomery County, the parents sued Montgomery County Public Schools for not making them aware of their children and some of the things they were doing in school, and the parents lost. A federal judge ruled in favor of the Montgomery County school system, saying that they did not have to inform the parents if their child was identifying as something different in school versus at home. So it's already happening. We can see this happening here. In other states, there was an Indiana couple who had their child taken away from them, and because they weren't going along with the child's gender-affirming care. It happened in Montana. So, and they're not backing away. You see with women's sports, they're not backing away. They're doubling down. With this amendment, what does that mean for things like that? But the things we do want to focus on are parental rights, the health and safety, and also the cost if we have to pay for it. So what we will need you to do is to, if you can donate, do that, but also volunteer. And I have volunteer sign-up forms for after I answer your questions. You can sign up because we'll want people to go to the primary polls and hand people information as they're coming out, because this is not on the primary ballot, it's on the general election ballot. So you want to let the voters go in and vote and then come out, and then you'd hand them something and say, hey, you need to know about this amendment, so that they know what to expect in the general election. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer any of your questions.
Just a question regarding that Montgomery County case. What judge was that, and how long ago was that?
I don't have the name of the judge, and it was just last year.
Okay, 2023?
Yeah, I believe it was just last 23. Anybody else have that date? If it wasn't 2023, it was 2022. So it was very recent, very recent. Yes?
You said they could define individual to be someone over 21. That would be like a law?
That was with the marijuana amendment. They defined the individuals the last election we were asked about putting marijuana in our Maryland Constitution. And that amendment specifically says that we're talking about individuals who are over 21 years of age. So they were able to define that, they can with any law, as we're talking about just individuals over 21 years of age. So just like alcohol, minors can't buy alcohol unless they're 21. You think about all the other things minors can't do. They can't drive a car till they're 16. They can't join the military. They can't buy cigarettes. At schools, they can't take Tylenol and ibuprofen. And still, even with this law, if a child needs a tonsillectomy, they're going to need parental consent. The surgeon's going to need parental consent to do a tonsillectomy. But this amendment makes it so that minors can consent to things that have to do with their reproductive anatomy. Now, in the criminal justice system, minors are treated like juveniles, as they should be, because they say that they don't have the mental capacity to understand the consequences of their actions. So it's a little schizophrenic to say in the criminal justice system they don't think like adults. But here, when it comes to decisions for their reproductive system or their reproductive anatomy, we think they have the mental capacity to say, yes, I want to take puberty blockers and cross hormones, and yes, I want a double mastectomy. Now, at the very least, parents should be able to be in the room with their child asking the questions that they know their child won't think to ask, just because they're too young and they don't have enough knowledge to ask about the long-term effects and what other increased health risks their child might have. In other states where this is passed, they're saying that parents are abusers if they don't just go along with it. This is just a normal thing you do when you're having any type of surgery. You're going to ask what the risks are, versus the benefits. Yes?
I've heard that Johns Hopkins will no longer do those kind of procedures because they have seen the long-term effects are negative and cannot be reversed for these kids that want them. Is that true?
They decided that after they did that study, and I always forget the decade, if it was the 70s or the 90s, but that they weren't going to do them. But I don't know if they're doing them again now. Because I think they're doing them again now, even though their study, which was out of the spotlight of political pressure or public pressure, showed that it was better to just treat people with gender dysphoria with corresponding drugs for their biological sex and therapy to help them accept themselves. And I think that there's a lot of political pressure to do these surgeries now and offer the hormones. So, which if adults want to do that, that's certainly their prerogative, but children, they're awfully young to make a decision about something that will affect them the rest of their life. Because if they continue down that path, they become infertile. They're not able to have children. And there's a lot of other problems too with it. They're not able to have a normal sex life, which is going to affect their interpersonal relationships. So it's really, and then you think about all the scars that you would have if you're redoing your body. And it also makes them, if they're continuing down that path, it makes them medically dependent for their life and surgically dependent to continually try and make their outside appearance match what they think it should look like. So they need our compassion. Yes?
So I think when you were briefing us on the current law, on the first page, the progression has been a rapid progression since 2021.
Yes.
And in 2023, we read here on the sheet that the Trans Health Equity Act is for gender-affirming care, as you mentioned, puberty blockers and surgery.
Right.
Am I wrong to say that this is going to be borne by taxpayers? It's going to be paid for under Medicaid, right?
Yep, Medicaid. Yeah.
So that really it falls to each of us. In other words, we're complicit in Maryland providing, like we were thinking,
right.
Maybe it's Johns Hopkins or maybe it's some other hospital.
Right.
What's to stop their effort, these proponents of all these transsexual rights, from requiring all hospitals, even Catholic hospitals, from having to do these? Is there?
Certainly, they are going to, that's how it's going to go. They'll put the pressure on it, probably by saying it's emergency care, using mental health issues as a reason for emergency care. And once it's in the Constitution as a right, then nothing can really abridge that right, including money. So again, private health insurance will probably be required to cover it as well. And these are all elective surgeries. These are elective surgeries. They're not, like you have a gigantic tumor in your abdomen and you have to have it removed. These are all elective surgeries. So once it's in the Constitution as a right, you're right to point that out, Thomas. What does that mean, again, for conscious protections? You had a question.
It's not a question. I've listened to you. There's only one thing that you need to do when you're handing out information to people, is that this takes your parental rights away.
Yes.
That's a very simple statement. You don't have to get into abortion. You don't have to get into
Right.
any crazy stuff. This takes your rights away. If you get that into their head, they're going to vote no.
Right.
So that's the message you have to have. This takes your parental rights away.
Exactly.
And that's the only thing you need to talk about. The rest of these issues, you're going to
Yeah.
have all kinds of arguments that are not going to win for you because people
Right.
are sick in their soul.
Right.
They're not so sick as to let somebody take their rights away.
Right. Right.
I think he's absolutely right, but I think the confusion is the official wording of this amendment is abortion amendment. So people think all
Right.
feminists are going to say, don't take my right away, and then they won't hear the parental part.
Exactly. That's the only reason, but you're right. You pivot.
With those women.
Right,
Those
you
women
pivot.
are not going to listen to you.
Yeah.
They're written off. You have to reach the people
Right.
that don't want their rights to be taken away.
Right.
They don't even care about abortion. They're not having an abortion. Their wife or daughters didn't have abortions. You don't want to talk
Well,
about
I will
abortion.
say,
about their rights.
right, you have to talk about,
Overwhelm the women
Right.
who are abortion women.
I know from my friends, because all of us have friends who are pro-abortion, good people, they have compassionate reasons for the way they think. And, they've said, but this is, we do think that this should be a right. So I do have to say to them, but it's not about that abortion is legal in Maryland through all 9 months and it's going to stay that way. This is about parental rights. So sometimes you do have to be able to say that. I do think you're right. Lead with this will take your rights away. And that will hopefully get them wondering, well, how? And then they can go look at it. Now, for
How's it going to take my rights away?
Right.
This is an individual, blah, blah, blah,
Right.
blah, blah, could only mean a child.
Right.
Blah, 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 blah. But your key phrase has to be, this takes your parental rights away.
Right.
And then you can go into, this is all about a child, boom, 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 boom.
Yeah.
If they want to argue with you. And
Yep.
you might even win over a few of the abortion women, all right?
Right.
But you're not going to necessarily, if you target them, you're wasting your energy.
Right.
You've got to target people that don't think about this issue at all.
That's the lead. You're exactly right. That's the lead. So this one about the current law is not, I wouldn't recommend handing that out. This is all for your education. That was really for people who want to dig deeper. There's plenty of people who, just hit the highlights, So it wouldn't be the one I would hand out. I would either, unless we come up with something shorter for the primaries, we're hoping to come up with something that's easy that you can maybe leave on people's doorknobs. But there's this one, but there's also 2 others you can choose from. Pick the one you like, the one that you think is going to appeal to the people. It's on the website. There are QR codes on those on the website, so they can go right to it. All of you are digesting this information, and it's great that now you know how important it is, because if you want to protect families and protect your rights, we need to vote against this amendment. So your job is, when you leave here, is to make sure as many people as you know about it. So take your personal email list, send an email to people, send them to healthnotharmmd.org to look up the information for themselves. If you have an address book and you want to print out the informational handouts from the site and mail it to the people you know, volunteer for going to early voting or the primaries for early voting and handing out the flyers. And if you know other churches, go talk to the other churches. try and get it in your bulletin, that where something, if you have a space in your bulletin where you can put that in every week to make sure the rest of your parishioners know, then you can put it in. And we do have resources, so you don't have to start from scratch. I can send them to Thomas. I don't know if I sent them already, but and he can share them with other people, a packet if you want to go talk to other churches, and he could share that with you to take to other churches and spread the word, because we have about 5 to 6 million people in Maryland, and about 3.5 million of those are voters. So that's how many people we need to reach. Montgomery County, PG County, very densely populated counties. You guys are really important, so we really need to get to your counties, and Anne Arundel as well, to make sure that we defeat this thing. Well, I want to thank you all for coming here. I hope you'll volunteer, get the word out. If you can donate, because this is a grassroots effort. We hope to raise enough money to come up with something to do direct mail. We feel the most effective way to spend any money that we raise would be through direct mail. What we've seen in other states, when they did try to do radio and TV ads, they were expensive and they could not compete with the supporters of the amendment. They have millions and millions of dollars to spend. We don't. We'd love to raise, a few $1,000,000 if we could, because direct mail, you figure it costs about $1 per person to get something out. So $3.5 million, right there, if you're thinking 3.5 billion voters to get that out. So it really is going to depend on you to get out and spread the word, and have those conversations with your friends that don't think like you look. Say, hey, I want to talk about this because I care about you and your kids and your grandkids and how they're raising their families. I care about everybody and their ability to raise their families. So please listen to me. Please at least consider it. I know it can be uncomfortable, but this is what needs to be done. I've had to have the conversation myself with people that I know don't think the way I do, but I care about them. And this is common grounds with, again, I think Republicans, Democrats, Independents, pro-abortion and pro-life. I think all of us feel like we're the ones who should be in charge of our own children, not somebody else. Especially if you're the one paying the bills for your children, or you have to take care of them after something happens. So it's grassroots. It really does depend on you to get the word out. And I think we can do it. So just
need 49.9 to agree with, 50.1 to agree with us. And
yeah, it is a simple majority to pass that amendment. It's a simple majority in Maryland. So, okay.
yes.
Thank you.
Round of